In this video I'm going to cover 5 tips for anyone wanting to get into drone filming or learning more about drones in general and how to use them safely, but also from the creative side as well. My first tip is about drone safety. When you buy a brand new drone, you've spent £1,000 on it or whatever, you don't want it crashing into a wall, so I would definitely not recommend using DJI's quick shot modes unless you're in a clear area, clear confined area with no obstacles or no obstructions to hit the drone. The obstacle avoidance sensors are turned off in these modes, so I would only use these modes if you're in a clear confined space area. As well as this, the return to home function is very useful for kind of helping you if you're not sure how to return your drone back, but it's always better to manually fly the drone back because things like obstacle avoidance sensors won't work, and also if the drone is in heavy wind it will turn sports mode off if you're in sports mode and put it in normal mode, so that actually could have problems with fighting back the wind and getting your drone back home. It's important to not let the drone's battery go flat just because it will kind of auto land, and you never know, it might auto land in a pool or something like that, so because it won't be able to detect, it will just kind of auto land and it won't really care. So it's 100% recommended to, when you're on about 40%, to bring the drone back home just so you don't have any problems. And the other thing to bear in mind is the wind might be heavier coming back, so you might need more battery life to return your drone home. It's important to remember to keep your drone in line of sight so you don't have any problems with signal interference, so you can manually fly the drone back if you lose signal. In the UK it isn't possible to fly over 400 feet without special CAA permission due to the fact that drones could get in the contact of planes. Drone batteries are a crucial part of filming, and in some cases you might need about 3 or 4 just so you don't run out of battery life due to some drones only lasting about 20 minutes. It's important to maintain your batteries, keep them in a dry environment. It's best to store the batteries at 40 to 60% to keep them in the best condition. As well as this, the drone's batteries will discharge after a few days to keep them from kind of overheating, so it's very important to remember this, so for your next shoot you need to make sure they're fully charged the day before. One of the last of my drone safety tips includes weather. Weather is a very crucial part of flying a drone, and in the UK it can be quite unlucky. It's important to not fly when it's raining, and as well as this, fog is not really recommended to fly due to the fog can be picked up by the optical avoidance sensors. If you start flying your drone and it starts raining, you need to bring it back straight away. I've had a few instances before where I've had to just quickly bring it back, and luckily if you're quite sensible and you bring the drone back, even if it starts raining you'll be fine. But obviously I would not take off if it's raining. To check the weather, the Met Office app is a really great way to see the wind speed, to see if it's going to rain and the probability of it raining. With drones, ND filters can be quite an overlooked thing, just because you think you can just bump the shutter speed up and it will work. But actually on most drones, they don't have an adjustable aperture. By having a fixed aperture, it means you can't adjust your aperture, and that means you've got not as much control over your exposure, making ND filters a very viable option. Even with the Mavic 2 Pro, for example, it has its sharpest kind of quality at f4, so an ND filter is very useful in that case to get the accurate motion blur to create cinematic images. Having the correct licenses and permissions can be very important when filming with drones. It's very different from the commercial and the recreational flyer point of view. If you're a recreational flyer, you still need to obtain a flyer ID, which costs £9 at the time of this video, and take a short test by the CAA consisting of 20 questions. So basically it's all you have to do if you want to fly a drone just for fun. One surprise that I actually found out is, even if you're a hobbyist pilot or someone who doesn't maybe want to pursue it as kind of a career or kind of a side hustle, is that you can actually sell your shots on black box even if you don't have a commercial license. But it's a completely other story when it comes to taking on contracted work by a production company. In the UK at the moment there are 2 main drone courses, the GVC or General Visual Line of Sight and the A2 CFC. They're both kind of aimed at different people. The GVC is aimed at the more pro drone pilots who are wanting to do this as a living and pursue it as a living. It has a higher cost and yearly membership fees, but at the same time you can fly bigger, more complex drones and complete more complex operations. You can kind of fly a drone with a red camera on, but you can't do that if you're a A2 CFC pilot. With the A2 CFC you can fly smaller drones, but at the same time you can still fly one of the bigger Mavic drones, which is still kind of interesting to know. and there are slightly more restrictions with the A2 CFC. I think new people getting into drones should consider doing the A2 CFC, and then if they get quite a bit of demand for their service, then looking at the GVC, because the GVC will ultimately make you stand out from other drone pilots, as it allows you to do more complex operations and is a harder and more complex course altogether. It's important to complete risk assessments before every shoot, as there can be a variety of problems such as power lines, interference with public, and these need to be addressed straight away in the risk assessment, so on the day you can eliminate the types of risks that can happen and protect the drone and protect any vulnerable people. As well as this, landowner permission should be obtained for drone shoots. In this section we're going to cover some technical things such as frame rates, picture profiles and camera settings. In general, the best camera setting for a drone is shooting log. A lot of drones don't offer this feature, but the Inspire 2 and the DJI Mavic 2 Pro offer log. Log basically allows you to shoot in a flat picture profile. A flat picture profile allows you to maintain the highest dynamic range possible to get the most detail in your highlights and your shadows. This is very important for capturing things such as sunsets and sunrise shots. Some other things to note is it's best to buy a drone that shoots in 4K. Even if you plan on publishing in 1080p, the 4K will give you better noise performance when you are downscaling, and you can crop into your drone shots, which is very important, in particular if you don't want to get too close to a subject. A lot of drones use quite small sensors. Even the Mavic 2 Pro, for example, uses a 1-inch sensor. A lot of other drones use half-inch sensors, and they're really bad in low light, so I'd recommend using the lowest ISO possible, not exceeding 400 in a lot of cases. In terms of drone frame rates, a lot of people can think, I want to film in slow motion in my drone, it will look really cool, but actually a lot of drone shots are quite smooth already and quite slow, so I'd recommend shooting in 24 frames for most stuff. 30 frames also is a really good option if you're wanting to kind of slow down the action a little bit and get a little bit more smoothness back, but obviously there's options of 50 and 60 frames with certain drones if you want true slow motion, but I do think 24 frames is actually quite good in a lot of cases. A lot of the higher end drones allow you to film in 10-bit or RAW in some cases, which allows for greater flexibility and control of your images. Things like banding can be very apparent in 8-bit drone footage, particularly in skies and sunsets, so it's actually quite important, if you can, to get a drone that can film in at least 10-bit. RAW is the ultimate option for capturing multiple exposures for getting the highest quality image possible. My final tip is ultimately drones are just a tool at the end of the day. Like any tool, like a gimbal, a Steadicam, a lens, they are a tool for a certain job and they should only be used for a certain job. And like gimbals, for example, a lot of people can misuse drones and kind of throw random drone shots in there, even if it's not required. So it's very important to think of the purpose a drone is required for and if it's absolutely necessary or not. A massive thank you again for watching this video. If you like all things drones, definitely consider subscribing, and annotated here are some drone related tutorials and behind the scenes videos.